My father stood in his marble foyer, champagne flute frozen midway to his lips, as I stepped through the doorway he'd slammed in my face 10 years ago. Behind me, 3 of my trucks idled in his circular drive, 18-wheelers painted with the logo he'd once called that embarrassing little hobby. His company, Bennett Freight Solutions, was mine now. Every loading dock, every route, every employee who'd watched him mock me at the annual Christmas party. The acquisitions team had closed the deal at 9 a.m. It was 9:47, and I'd driven here myself because some deliveries you make in person. "Hello, Dad," I said. "We need to talk about operational changes." The argument started over lamb chops. That's what I remember most. Not the words themselves, but the way my father's knife scraped against bone as he told me I was wasting my life. "You're throwing away a Yale education to drive a truck," he said, cutting the meat with surgical precision. "Do you understand how that sounds? How it reflects on this family?" My mother picked at her salad, eyes fixed on the vinaigrette pooling at the bottom of her bowl. My younger sister Emma checked her phone under the table. The dining room chandelier threw sharp light across the mahogany surface, making everything feel like a stage set. I was 23, freshly graduated with a degree in supply chain management, and I just told them I'd accepted a position as a long-haul driver with a regional carrier. "It's not just driving," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's understanding the entire logistics chain from the inside. You've always said you can't manage what you don't know." "I said that about business operations." He set down his knife with a click. "Not manual labor. Henry, you had offers from 3 consulting firms. Goldman Sachs wanted to interview you. Instead, you're going to spend your days in a cab that smells like diesel and cheap coffee, wearing a baseball cap with someone else's logo on it." The thing about my father, Marcus Bennett, was that he'd built his freight brokerage from nothing. He started with 1 truck in 1987, driving routes himself between Boston and Philadelphia, sleeping in rest stops, eating vending machine sandwiches. By the time I was born, Bennett Freight Solutions had 70 trucks and a reputation for reliability. By the time I graduated college, it was a regional player with contracts across New England and the Mid-Atlantic. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it felt like to grip a steering wheel for 14 hours straight, to feel the road thrum through your spine, to navigate a 40-ton vehicle through a snowstorm because a hospital needed medical supplies by dawn. Or maybe he remembered, and that's why he wanted something different for me, something cleaner, something he could describe at cocktail parties without seeing pity flash across people's faces. "I'm doing this for 2 years, I told him. Then I'll have real experience, not theoretical models from a classroom, but actual knowledge of how freight moves, where the inefficiencies are, what drivers need. You always said the best leaders come up through the ranks." "I came up through necessity," he snapped. "You have options. You're choosing to step backward." My mother finally spoke. "Marcus, he's 23. Let him make his own mistakes." The word mistakes hung in the air like smoke. That's when I knew. This wasn't concern. It was embarrassment. I was supposed to be the son who validated his climb, who proved that Marcus Bennett had built something substantial enough to launch his children into stratospheric careers: corporate law, investment banking, tech startups. Not the same blue-collar foundation he'd clawed his way out of. "I start Monday," I said quietly. "I've already signed the contract." He stared at me for 10 seconds. Then he laughed. Not a chuckle, but a sharp bark of disbelief. "A dead-end job? That's what you've chosen. Well, don't come crying to me when you're 50 years old, still hauling someone else's freight, with a bad back and nothing saved for retirement." I left before dessert. For the next 2 years, I drove. I learned every truck stop between Portland, Maine and Richmond, Virginia. I learned how to read weather patterns, how to spot a failing brake system from the sound it made, how to talk a panicked dispatcher through a reroute when a bridge closure threatened to blow a delivery window. I learned which shippers respected drivers and which ones made you wait 6 hours in a warehouse parking lot without access to a bathroom. I learned that the real logistics network wasn't the software systems or the dispatch algorithms. It was the drivers, the dock workers, the warehouse managers who made 1,000 micro decisions every day to keep goods flowing. I also learned that my father had been right about one thing. It was brutal. The isolation, the physical toll, the constant pressure to make impossible schedules work. But he'd been wrong about the most important thing. It wasn't a dead end. It was the foundation. During downtime, I sketched ideas in notebooks, ways to optimize routes using real-time traffic data, driver-friendly scheduling systems that reduced burnout, partnerships between carriers that could create network effects without formal mergers. I started a blog about logistics efficiency, writing posts during mandatory rest breaks. By month 8, I had 3,000 regular readers. By month 14, a venture capital analyst reached out. I met Sarah Chen at a truck stop diner outside Hartford. She was tracking inefficiencies in the freight industry, looking for operators who understood the gap between how logistics should work and how it actually worked. I pitched her on a platform concept, a driver-owned cooperative model with shared resources, smart routing, and transparent pricing. She told me it would take 10 years and $100 million. So, let's start. We launched the pilot with 6 drivers, friends I'd made on the road who were exhausted by the same problems. We called it OpenHaul. The name was intentional. Open source principles applied to freight with drivers as stakeholders instead of expendable labor. We built software that integrated directly with shipping platforms, cutting out traditional brokers and passing the savings to both drivers and customers. We offered benefits, predictable schedules, and profit sharing. It grew slowly, then suddenly. By year 3, we had 200 trucks. By year 5, 2,000. By year 7, we were a recognized player in the industry, and I'd stopped driving routes myself, though I still kept my CDL current and took a truck out every few months, just to stay grounded. My father watched from a distance. He never called, never emailed. Once, at my sister's wedding, he asked how that trucking thing was going. I told him we'd just secured a major contract with a national retailer. He nodded once and changed the subject to Emma's law school applications. I told myself I didn't care. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was in our headquarters, a converted warehouse in Providence that still smelled faintly of machine oil, when my CFO knocked on the door. "Bennett Freight Solutions is for sale," she said. "Quiet listing, but it's real. They're hemorrhaging contracts. Marcus is looking for an exit." I stared at the email she'd forwarded. A boutique M&A firm representing a well-established regional freight brokerage with legacy relationships and strategic real estate assets. The description was deliberately vague, but the revenue numbers gave it away. I'd memorized my father's business years ago, back when I thought I might join it someday. "They're asking $40 million, my CFO continued, but the earnings are soft. 3 years of declining margins. 2 major clients jumped ship last quarter. Honestly, I'd say they're worth 30, maybe 32 if we're being generous." I walked to the window. Below, in our lot, a dozen OpenHaul trucks were being prepped for afternoon runs. Drivers stood in small clusters, laughing, checking their phones, drinking coffee from the break room we'd designed with input from a driver committee. We'd built something good here, something that treated people like partners, not interchangeable parts in a profit machine. "Why are they selling?" I asked. "Best guess, Marcus is 68, and he's tired. His model is outdated. Traditional brokerage, high overhead, dependent on personal relationships that are aging out. He hasn't adapted to the platform economy. Probably thought he'd sell 5 years ago for twice the price, but the market moved past him." There was poetry in that. The man who'd called my career a dead end was now sitting on a dying business, built on the same foundation he'd once driven himself. The industry had changed. He hadn't. "Set up a meeting," I said. "Anonymous buyer. Go through the firm. I want full access to their financials, client lists, and operational data before we make an offer." She raised an eyebrow. "You're seriously considering this?" Due diligence isn't the same as a decision. But I knew I'd already decided. Not out of revenge, though I'd be lying if I said the symmetry didn't appeal to me, but because Bennett Freight Solutions had something we needed: real estate.
They owned warehouses in 4 strategic locations we'd been trying to lease space near for 2 years. They had legacy contracts with manufacturers who were skeptical of new companies, even though we were demonstrably better. And they had employees, dispatchers, warehouse managers, administrative staff who deserved better than to be collateral damage in my father's decline. The due diligence took 3 weeks. What we found was worse than the initial number suggested. Bennett Freight Solutions was 6 months from insolvency. Marcus had been propping up the appearance of stability by deferring maintenance, underpaying staff, and taking on high-interest loans. 2 of his largest clients were only staying because their procurement managers were personal friends, and both had told him they'd need to rebid the contracts next fiscal year. "It's a rescue, not an acquisition," my CFO said. "We'd be saving him," I corrected, "and the business working there, and the people working there." We made an offer. $28 million, all cash, with retention packages for all non-executive employees and a transition period to integrate operations. The M&A firm came back with a counteroffer of $35 million. We held firm. They came down to 32. We agreed to 30. Final offer, contingent on a clean audit. The deal closed on a Friday in December. I signed the papers in a conference room overlooking Providence Harbor, watching snow dust the water. Sarah Chen, now our chief strategy officer, sat beside me. "You know he's going to figure out it was you," she said. "Eventually," I agreed, "but by then it'll be done." "And you're okay with that? Showing up like some kind of corporate avenger?" I thought about the dinner 10 years ago, the way he laughed, the way my mother had called my choice a mistake, the way Emma had looked at me afterward, in the foyer, and whispered, "I think you're brave," before hurrying upstairs. "I'm not showing up for revenge," I said. "I'm showing up because it's Monday morning and new ownership needs to address the staff." But I drove there in a truck, one of our first models from the pilot program, with OpenHaul painted in bold letters across the trailer. And I brought 2 more as escort vehicles, because I wanted him to see exactly what I'd built from that dead-end job. My father's office was on the 2nd floor of the main warehouse, accessible by a metal staircase that rattled when you climbed it. I remembered that rattle from childhood visits, back when he'd occasionally bring me to work on school holidays. I'd sit in the break room eating vending machine cookies while he yelled into a phone about delayed shipments. The staff meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived at 9:15, deliberately early, and parked all 3 trucks in the main lot where everyone would see them. Our head of HR, James, had flown in from Providence. He carried folders with new employment contracts, benefit summaries, and an FAQ sheet about the transition. "How do you want to play this?" he asked as we walked toward the entrance. "Honest and direct," I said. "These people are worried about their jobs. They need to know what's happening and what it means for them." The receptionist looked up as we entered, and her expression shifted from professional smile to confusion. "Can I help you?" "I'm Henry Bennett," I said, "new owner. I'm here for the staff meeting." She blinked, glanced at James, back to me. "Mr. Bennett is already—" "My father," I said gently. "I know. Is he in his office?" She nodded slowly, then picked up the phone. I heard her murmur something about a visitor and says he's the new owner. A pause, then her eyes widened. "He's coming down," she said faintly. I waited in the lobby, hands in my pockets, while James stood beside me with his folders. The warehouse floor beyond the partition buzzed with activity. Forklifts beeping, pallets being loaded, voices calling out dock numbers. Normal operations, unaware that the ground had shifted beneath them. My father appeared at the top of the metal staircase. He'd aged since the wedding 3 years ago, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. He wore a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie, and his expression was pure confusion. "What are you doing here?" he called down. "Came to talk about the business," I said. "Figured we should do it before the meeting." He descended the stairs slowly, gripping the railing. When he reached the bottom, he looked at James, at the folders, at me. "What meeting? What are you talking about?" "The staff meeting at 10, I said, "to announce the ownership change and outline the transition plan. Didn't the M&A firm inform you I was coming today?" His face went pale. "What ownership change?" "Bennett Freight Solutions was acquired by OpenHaul Logistics," I said. "The deal closed Friday. I'm here as the new owner to meet the team and explain next steps." He stared at me. looked past me, through the glass doors to the parking lot, where the 3 trucks sat like exclamation points. Back to me. You, he said. It wasn't a question. You bought my company. OpenHaul bought it, I corrected. I'm the founder and CEO, yes. But this was a business decision made by our leadership team, not a personal vendetta. Bullshit, his voice cracked. You did this to humiliate me. People were starting to notice. A warehouse supervisor had stopped mid-conversation to watch us. The receptionist was frozen at her desk, phone halfway to her ear. I did this to save 38 jobs, I said quietly. Your business was 6 months from bankruptcy. You've been deferring maintenance, underpaying staff, and taking on unsustainable debt to maintain the illusion of stability. We're offering retention bonuses to every non-executive employee, comprehensive benefits, and integration into a profitable, growing company. That's not humiliation, that's a lifeline. I built this company from nothing, he said, and his voice shook. I drove those routes myself, slept in my truck, ate garbage for years to make this work. And you swoop in after I've had a few tough years and a few tough years. I pulled out my phone, opened the financial summary my CFO had compiled. You've lost 18% of your revenue in 3 years. Your client retention rate is down to 60%. You have 2 trucks with failing transmissions that you can't afford to repair. Your warehouse in Newark has a roof leak you've been patching with tarps for 8 months. You owe $400,000 to 3 different lenders at interest rates that should be criminal. I put the phone away. You didn't have a few tough years. You had a business model that couldn't adapt, and you waited too long to admit it. He looked at me like I'd hit him. So what? You're here to gloat? To rub my face in the fact that you succeeded where I'm failing? I'm here, I said, to make sure your employees don't lose their livelihoods because you were too proud to ask for help. James cleared his throat gently. Mr. Bennett, the staff will be gathering in 10 minutes. We should probably prepare. My father glanced at James, then back at me. What happens to me? That's up to you, I said. We're offering a consulting position, part-time, to help with the transition. Your knowledge of the legacy clients is valuable. Or, if you prefer, the sale proceeds give you a clean retirement. Either way, you're not losing everything, but you're not in charge anymore. He stood there in the lobby of the company he'd built, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look small. Not physically. He was still tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of presence that filled a room. But something inside him had collapsed, the scaffolding of certainty that had always held him upright. I told you it was a dead-end job, he said finally. You did, I agreed, and you were wrong.
The conference room was too small for the full staff, so we held the meeting on the warehouse floor. Everyone gathered in a cleared section near the loading docks. 38 people, ranging from teenagers working part-time in the office to warehouse veterans who'd been with Bennett Freight Solutions since the early 90s. They stood in clusters, murmuring, casting nervous glances at the trucks visible through the bay doors. My father stood off to the side, arms crossed, face unreadable. I'd offered him the chance to introduce me, to maintain some dignity in front of his employees. He declined with a curt shake of his head. James handed me a wireless microphone. I'd addressed crowds before, investor presentations, industry conferences, TED-style talks at logistics symposiums, but this felt different. These people didn't care about market disruption or network effects. They cared about whether they'd have jobs next week. Good morning, I said, and my voice echoed slightly in the cavernous space. My name is Henry Bennett, and as of Friday, OpenHaul Logistics is the new owner of Bennett Freight Solutions. A ripple of whispers. Someone in the back said, Bennett? Like Marcus's son? Yes, I said clearly. Marcus Bennett is my father. But I'm not here because of that. I'm here because OpenHaul saw an opportunity to acquire valuable real estate, established client relationships, and, most importantly, a team of experienced logistics professionals who deserve better than what they've been dealing with. I paused. Let that sink in. I know there's been uncertainty. I know the last few years have been difficult. Delayed paychecks, deferred maintenance, clients leaving. I know some of you have been worried about layoffs or wondering if this place was going to shut down. I'm here to tell you that's not happening.
More whispers, but these had a different quality. Hopeful. Every non-executive employee in this room is being offered a new contract with OpenHaul. That means competitive wages, immediate raises for anyone currently below industry standard, comprehensive benefits, including health insurance, dental, vision, and a 401k match, paid time off that actually gets used, not just accrued and ignored, and most importantly, a voice in how this operation runs. I gestured to James. Our HR director will be meeting with each of you individually this week to go over your specific offers and answer questions. But I want to be clear, we're not here to gut this company. We're here to integrate it into a model that works. That means investing in the equipment, the facilities, and the people. A hand went up near the front, a woman in her 50s wearing a dispatcher's headset around her neck. What about the Newark warehouse? The roof is going to be fully repaired within 30 days, I said. We've already contracted a commercial roofing company. The 2 trucks with failing transmissions will be replaced with newer models by the end of the month. And we're upgrading the dispatch software to a system that actually talks to our routing algorithms. Another hand, a younger guy, maybe mid-20s. Are you keeping the Bennett name? I glanced at my father. He was staring at the floor. We're keeping it as a legacy brand for the existing client relationships, I said. But operationally, you'll be part of OpenHaul. That means access to our full network, better routes, more flexible scheduling, and support from a company that's growing, not shrinking. The questions continued for 20 minutes. Specific, practical concerns about insurance transitions, vacation time rollovers, whether the break room coffee would get better. I answered each one as directly as I could. And when I didn't know the answer, I said so and promised to find out. Finally, a voice from the back, older, gruff. What about Marcus? Everyone turned to look at my father. He lifted his head, met my eyes. Marcus built something important here, I said. This company has been a fixture in the regional logistics network for almost 40 years. That's not nothing. We're offering him a consulting position to help with the transition, particularly with the legacy clients who've worked with him personally for decades. Beyond that, it's his choice what role he wants to play going forward. My father's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, curtly, and that was enough. After the meeting, people clustered around James to ask follow-up questions. I walked the warehouse floor, noting the worn concrete, the outdated loading equipment, the jury-rigged solutions that spoke to years of deferred investment. A forklift with duct tape holding a side mirror in place. A dock door that had to be manually cranked because the motor had died. Small things, individually, but collectively, they painted a picture of a business slowly bleeding out. Henry. I turned. My father stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Up close, I could see how tired he looked. Not just physically, but in a deeper way. The exhaustion of someone who'd been holding up a crumbling structure through sheer force of will. You didn't have to do this, he said. You could have let me find another buyer, someone who wasn't... He gestured vaguely. You. There wasn't going to be another buyer, I said, not at a price that would have covered your debts. You were out of time. So you rescued me? The word came out bitter. Is that it? The prodigal son comes home to save dear old dad? I rescued 38 people who didn't deserve to lose their jobs because you couldn't admit the industry had changed, I said. If that also helps you, fine. But this wasn't about you. He flinched like I'd slapped him. 10 years, he said. You've been gone 10 years. No calls, no emails. You sent a card when your mother had surgery, but you didn't visit. Emma had to tell me about your business through news articles. And now you show up like this, with your trucks and your team and your rescue plan? And I'm supposed to, what, be grateful? You told me I was a failure, I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. You laughed at my choice. You called it a dead-end job and told me not to come crying when I ended up 50 and broken. So no, I didn't call, I didn't email. I built something despite you, not because of you. And now that thing is big enough to keep your legacy from collapsing entirely. We stood there in the warehouse, surrounded by the echo of forklifts and the smell of cardboard and diesel. 10 years of silence between us, compressed into this one moment. I was wrong, he said finally. About the job, about what you could build. He stopped, started again. I was scared you'd end up like I almost did, broken and 50. I wanted better for you. I know, I said, but you couldn't see that I was finding a better way. A way that didn't burn people out or treat them as disposable. You were so focused on what you'd climbed away from that you couldn't see that I was building something different. No, he agreed. I couldn't. I'm sorry. The apology sat between us, imperfect but real. It didn't erase 10 years, it didn't undo the dinner or the silence or the hurt, but it was something. The consulting position starts January 1st, I said. Think about it. Talk to Mom. Let me know by Christmas. He nodded. And if I say no, then you retire and we both move on with our lives, I said. But either way, your people are taken care of. That's what matters.
The first time my father walked into our Providence headquarters, he stood in the lobby for a full minute, just looking around. The converted warehouse still had exposed brick and steel beams, but we'd transformed it into something between an industrial loft and a tech startup. Open floor plans, collaborative spaces, a cafeteria with actual food instead of vending machines, and a full-time mechanic shop where drivers could get minor repairs done without going through a third-party vendor. It's different, he said finally. That's kind of the point, I replied. He'd accepted the consulting position after Christmas, though it had taken 3 conversations with my mother and 1 with Emma to convince him. His first project was helping us transition the legacy accounts, introducing OpenHaul to procurement managers who'd been doing business with Bennett Freight Solutions since the 90s. He approached it methodically, treating each client relationship like a puzzle he was uniquely qualified to solve. What surprised me was how good he was at it. Freed from the pressure of keeping a failing business alive, he relaxed into the parts of logistics he actually enjoyed. The relationship building, the problem solving, the satisfaction of connecting the right carrier with the right shipment. He started coming to the office 3 days a week, setting up in a small workspace near the operations team. And gradually, people stopped seeing him as Marcus Bennett, the guy whose company got bought out, and started seeing him as Marcus, the consultant who knows everybody. In March, he proposed an idea during a strategy meeting. You're growing fast in the Northeast, he said, but you're missing opportunities in the Mid-Atlantic because you don't have the regional reputation yet. What if we created a mentorship program? Pair experienced operators like me with your newer team members. Not management, peer guidance. Let us open doors while your people show the value of your model. Sarah Chen loved it. Within 2 months, we had a pilot program running, and client retention in the newly acquired territories jumped 12%. My mother started coming to the office occasionally, bringing lunch for my father and staying to chat with the staff. She'd always been better at people than he was, warm where he was gruff, interested where he was focused. The dispatchers loved her. She remembered their kids' names, asked about their hobbies, and once organized an impromptu birthday party for someone who'd mentioned offhand that she'd be spending it alone. Your mother says you're seeing someone, my father said one afternoon, catching me off guard as I reviewed route optimization data. I looked up from my screen. Sarah mentioned that? No, your actual mother. She called me this morning to say you'd brought someone to Emma's engagement party last weekend and that I should be normal about it, whatever that means. I couldn't help but smile. Her name is Claire. She runs a nonprofit that provides job training for people transitioning out of incarceration. We met at a logistics conference. And? He prompted. And what? Is it serious? The question felt strange coming from him. We'd never done this. Casual conversation about personal lives, the kind of back and forth that other fathers and sons seem to navigate effortlessly. Maybe, I said. It's new, but yeah, I think so. He nodded, then returned to his own work. But 5 minutes later, he said, without looking up, your mother would like to meet her. Properly, I mean, not just at a party. Maybe dinner sometime. I'll ask her, I said. The dinner happened 3 weeks later, at a restaurant in downtown Providence that Claire picked because she'd read about their commitment to hiring people with criminal records. My mother dominated the conversation, asking Claire about her work, her background, her opinions on everything from prison reform to the best way to roast Brussels sprouts. My father was quieter, listening more than talking, but when Claire mentioned she was struggling to find reliable transportation for her clients to get to job interviews, he leaned forward. What kind of transportation? He asked. Mostly just getting people across the city, Claire explained.
A lot of our clients don't have cars, and public transit doesn't always line up with interview times. We've been using a mix of volunteers and ride-sharing, but it's inconsistent. What if you had a dedicated vehicle, my father said, maybe a small van, professionally maintained, with a volunteer driver rotation. OpenHaul has connections with fleet management companies. I could make some calls. Claire blinked. That would be incredible, but we don't have the budget. Let me look into it, he said. No promises, but there might be grant funding or corporate sponsorship options. Within a month, Claire's nonprofit had a van, donated by a fleet management company my father had worked with for 20 years. He personally coordinated the maintenance schedule and recruited 3 retired drivers to volunteer as backup transportation. When I thanked him, he shrugged it off. She's doing good work, he said, and you clearly care about her. So, that "so" carried weight. It wasn't a declaration or an apology or a promise to be different. It was an acknowledgement, quiet and imperfect, that maybe we were figuring out how to be in each other's lives again. By summer, the Bennett Freight Solutions integration was complete. The warehouses had been upgraded, the equipment replaced, the employees fully transitioned to OpenHaul contracts. We'd retained 97% of the workforce. The 3 who left did so for personal reasons unrelated to the acquisition, and client satisfaction scores were the highest they'd been in 5 years. At the 6-month mark, we held a company-wide celebration at the Providence headquarters. 200 employees, plus family members, gathered in the parking lot for a catered barbecue. We rented a stage for speeches, set up yard games for kids, and brought in a local band. It felt less like a corporate event and more like a neighborhood block party, which was exactly the vibe we wanted. I gave a short speech, thanking everyone for making the integration successful, highlighting specific teams and individuals who'd gone above and beyond. Then I invited my father to the microphone. He looked surprised. I hadn't told him I was going to do this, but he stood, walked to the stage, and took the mic. I'm not great at speeches, he started, and a few people chuckled, but I wanted to say something about what it means to build something and what it means to let it go. He paused, looking out at the crowd, people he'd worked with for decades, alongside people who joined in the last 6 months, all mingling together. I started Bennett Freight Solutions in 1987 with 1 truck and a lot of stubbornness. I built it into something I was proud of, but somewhere along the way, I stopped innovating. I got comfortable, and when the industry changed, I didn't change with it. I convinced myself that experience and loyalty would be enough, and I was wrong. Another pause. My son saw what I couldn't. He built a model that respects people, invests in technology, and adapts to how the world actually works. And when he had the chance to let my business fail, to let me fail, he didn't. He stepped in, not because he owed me anything, he didn't, but because he saw people who deserved better. His voice wavered slightly. I told him once that driving trucks was a dead-end job. I was wrong about that, and I was wrong about a lot of things. But I'm grateful he didn't listen to me. Because what he's built here, what all of you are building, is something better than I ever managed. He handed the mic back to me and stepped down from the stage. The crowd applauded, and I saw my mother standing near the food table, wiping her eyes. After the speeches, after the food and the games and the band, people started filtering out. My father found me near one of the trucks, the same 1987 model OpenHaul I'd driven to his office 6 months ago. You kept it, he said, running a hand along the fender. First truck from the pilot program, I said. Figured it deserved to stick around. He nodded, then turned to face me. I don't know if I've said this clearly enough, so I'm going to say it now. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm proud of how you've handled all of this. The acquisition, the integration, the way you've treated people. You're a better operator than I ever was. I learned from you, I said, the good parts and the mistakes. That's generous. It's true. We stood there in the parking lot as the sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the trucks and the warehouse and the whole scene in warm orange light. 10 years ago, I'd left his house angry and determined to prove him wrong. Now, standing beside him in the space I'd built, I realized I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The work spoke for itself. Your mother wants to do Sunday dinners again, he said after a while. Regular thing. You, Emma, Claire if she wants to come. She's been pestering me about it for weeks. I'd like that, I said. Good. He patted the truck once more, then started toward the parking lot where my mother was waiting by their car. He paused, looked back. See you Sunday then. See you Sunday, I agreed. I watched them drive away, then turned back to the warehouse. Inside, the operations team was prepping for the overnight runs, routes planned and optimized, drivers checking in and out with the easy rhythm of a system that worked. Tomorrow, we'd do it again, and the day after that. Building something, one delivery at a time, in a job someone once told me was a dead end. He was wrong, but I already knew that.